Welcome to topic 5 of ethical hacking. And in this topic, we're looking at the second part of legislation and everyone's favourite act, of course. It's the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. Now, rather than have to say the words the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 over and over again, it's sometimes just called REPA, and it's commonly known as REPA. We just call it REPA. We don't say the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 because it's too much. So the REPA governs the use of covert surveillance by the police, and it ensures that intrusive powers are subject to strict safeguards. Okay, so safeguards are put in place to ensure that public bodies, when they're providing surveillance on the public, they do these properly. Okay, or when I say properly, I mean this is a legal fiction, really, isn't it? So 3 commissioners oversee the use of REPA: the Interception of Communications Commissioner, the Intelligence Services Commissioner, and the Chief Surveillance Commissioner. What important jobs they have. And the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, which comprises independent senior lawyers and members of the judiciary, can hear complaints relating to the exercise of powers under this act. So this act was provided to provide a legal framework such as to security services and the police, to allow them to access electronic communications of individuals. So it's a crime for anyone who's not authorised by the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act to conduct surveillance. Okay, so REPA is allowing certain bodies to access the communication records, the telephone records, emails, post, and they say that the aim of doing this is to prevent and detect crimes, prevent public disorder, ensure national security and the safety of the general public, and investigate or detect abnormal or illegal use of telecommunication systems. So the Act will allow certain public bodies like the police to demand that an ISP provides all of your internet history, all of your communications, so all your emails, and your ISP should provide them to the police under this Act. It enables mass surveillance of communications in transit. So every single text that you send, every message that you send, every questionable picture that you send can be monitored. And it enables certain public bodies to demand ISPs to fit equipment to conduct surveillance on customers. And it enables certain public bodies to demand that someone hand over the keys to protected information. And it enables certain public bodies to monitor people's internet activities. And it prevents data from interception warrants from being used in court. So, quite a lot of powers there from the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. So here we have some information about monitoring employees. So some organisations regularly monitor what their employees are doing on the internet while they're at work. They can see which chat rooms they visit, which sites they use, to whom they send emails, and receive emails. And this monitoring enables organisations to build up a profile of what people are doing. Now, there have been some high-profile cases of employees being sacked for spending excessive time on, say, Facebook or eBay. And employers say this helps them to ensure that staff are using their time effectively and that work equipment is being used for approved purposes. However, many employees view this monitoring as a breach of trust and an invasion of their privacy. So here's an example from 2008. In April 2008, using REPA, council officials in Dorset put 3 children and their parents under surveillance to check whether those people actually lived in a school catchment area, to prove that the parents were trying to obtain a place for their children at a popular school when they didn't actually live in that catchment area. So this is an example of a misuse of REPA. And there are some safeguards in place in a bid to persuade MPs and the public that, you know, the legislation will not turn into another Snoopers charter. So, yeah, so REPA here. So if the police want to monitor what you're doing and get all your internet history, they can do this using this act here. Okay. Now, that's not to say that you have to do anything wrong for this to happen. You know, one way to look at this was that the regulation of Investigatory Powers Act just means that they have to come up with a reason to do this. Now, the reason doesn't have to be true. They just have to suspect that you're doing something. But, you know, at least they have to declare what they're doing. Okay. Whether it's fair, whether it's unfair, that's probably a different matter. But at least they have to use this act here. Okay, and go within it. All right, so the next, there's a discussion there that we can look at the end of the class. So the next one is the Investigatory Powers Act. So this is different from the regulation of, this is different from REPA. This is called the Snoopers Charter. And if you don't know what snoopers means, snooping on someone is like spying on them. So the Snoopers Charter was agreed by both Houses of Parliament and passed into law on the 29th of November 2016. So the Investigatory Powers Act is different from the regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Now, the Snoopers Charter was designed to force internet and communication companies to keep everyone's browsing history for up to a year. So until 2016, they didn't have to do that, but now they do. It would also protect the ability of GCHQ and MI5 to bulk collect data and hack into a suspect's electronic devices, and it gives the judge warrants to sign off for intrusive surveillance. So why is it controversial? Well, initially, when I remember in the early days of the internet, there was a lot available on the internet that is much more difficult to find now. So slowly but surely, governments and sort of public bodies, companies, corporations are slowly kind of making the internet much more controlled than it used to be. So privacy campaigners saw the Investigatory Powers Act 2016 as a bit of an invasion. Now, let's say you are a member of an environmental group and you spend your time researching oil companies. You might see it as an intrusion of privacy that the government and your ISP keep that as a record. Okay. People were also concerned about the extensive hacking powers that are granted in the Act. So, you know, under this Act, MI5 can hack into your computer. As I said at the very beginning of this class, if you don't want to be hacked into, don't put the thing online. You know, they can only hack into your computer if your computer is on. All right, turn it off. You know, disconnect from the network. So, those are the two kind of investigatory acts, the Investigatory Powers Act 2016 and REPA 2000. The next one we have is called the Police and Justice Act of 2006. Now, computer misuse takes a lot of different forms, and these change all the time. Okay, we didn't have social media to the degree we have now 10 or 15 years ago. We didn't have so many smartphones just a few years ago. So hackers and other computer terrorists are always coming up with new ways to create cybercrime. And it's estimated, and this is a 2018 estimate, that in the UK, computer misuse costs between 400 million and £2 billion of damage. Now, the Computer Misuse Act traditionally covers straight up misuse of a computer. And it sets out two key offences: unauthorised access to computer programs or data, and then a more serious version when you do unauthorised access to data with an intent to commit or facilitate offences. And finally, unauthorised modification, so going in and changing data. So the Police and Justice Act modifies the Computer Misuse Act slightly, and the changes make clear for the first time that denial of service attacks are an offence. And they also address the distribution of hacking tools. So the Police and Justice Act introduces a long-awaited amendments that the older Computer Misuse Act didn't have in place. So around the time of the Computer Misuse Act in 1990, there were no such thing as publicly available hacking tools. I mean, there wasn't really a public internet back then. So the Act establishes that a person committing an offence, if they supply or offer to supply any article believing it's likely to be used to commit or to assist in the commission of a hacking offence, are guilty of a crime under this Act. Okay. Now, the Police and Justice Act will replace the offence of unauthorised modification of data with a more detailed offence. And this says that a person who knowingly commits an unauthorised act in relation to a computer, intends to perform such an act, or is reckless as to whether they might be performing such an act, and the offence committed where the effect of the unauthorised act that impairs the operation of a computer, hinders access to a programme, or impairs the operation of any such programme or any such data. So those who post malware or distribute password lists on the internet will be guilty of a crime under this Act. The Act also introduces a new offence of obtaining and supplying and offering to supply a programme that has the intention that's likely to be used to commit or to assist in the commission of an offence. So the offence actually places the focus more on the distributor of the software rather than the user. So in the past, the Computer Misuse Act made it an offence to do the act, to actually modify the data or hack into the computer. The Police and Justice Act also make it an offence to distribute software that will allow you to do this. So when it says the offence places an onus, that just means it changes the direction, okay, into which the law is applied. So it also increases penalties, and you can be imprisoned for up to 10 years for an offence under the Police and Justice Act. So for example, if you distributed a tool that was used in hacking, you could be jailed for up to 10 years for that. Now, it's hoped that that will act as an additional deterrent. Okay, so that should put people off using or doing the things there. Now, some IT security professionals are concerned that it might inhibit the development of security tools for legitimate use. You might want to do network scans on your own network. You might want to do agreed tests with a company. So there's some uncertainty as to whether or not the penalties are proportionate, especially given current problems of overcrowding in UK prisons. So when we think about it, if we have people in prison in the UK, now I think the UK might have the largest prison population in Europe. I don't know. I think it might do. I'll have to check this. Hang on. UK prison population. So the UK currently has, all right, 83,500 people in prison at the moment. Okay, so Scotland, is slightly less in Scotland. Okay, now what's the point I'm trying to make here? If you were to distribute like a hacking tool and you didn't really know what you were doing, or you did, and it did something to somebody's website, like it put a funny picture on their website or something, you know, should you be put in jail for as long as someone who has violently attacked someone in the street? As I think what this paragraph is relating to, you know. So are you a violent criminal, you know, if you distributed a clever piece of hacking software? Okay. Depends. I think it depends on the outcome. So here's some clauses here from the Act that we should know. So clause 39 doubled the maximum jail sentence. Okay. So the maximum jail sentence was 5 years under the Computer Misuse Act. It's now 10 years for hacking into a computer system. Clause 40, a denial of service attack is illegal under Clause 40 of the the Police and Justice Act. Clause 41 bans the distribution of hacker tools. And Clause 42 said that attacks, probes, so doing an Nmap scan can be considered a probe that started before the commencement of this bill, but are not covered by the Act. Okay, so new types of offences are not covered under this Act. Okay, now a person will only be guilty of an offence if they intend or believe that software will be used to commit or assist in the commission of an offence. Okay, and it will also be considered an offence if you obtain any article with a view to it being supplied for the use to commit or the commission of an offence under this Act. So there we go. There's the Police and Justice Act 2006. All right, a little bit of an update to the more specific, hacking-specific terminology in the Computer Misuse Act. Okay, so the last one we're going to look at today is this one, the Copyrights, Designs and Patents Act 1988. So the Copyrights, Designs and Patent Act was enacted in 1988 as an update to an even older one called the 1956 Copyright Act. And it's designed to protect intellectual property. So the Act covers all types of intellectual property, written works, television, films, and it was designed to protect the copyright of individuals and groups. The Act protects the ownership of computer software in a similar way that copyright works with printed material. And the Act protects software for the life of the author and then 70 years. So music is the same. Music is protected for the whole life of the author. Then after the author dies, 70 years. So for example, a lot of classical music that comes from 2 centuries ago doesn't have copyright attached to it. So copyright is the act of protecting work. And copyright actually comes from an older terminology. So initially, copyright dates back to when the printing press was first invented. And when the printing press was first invented, what they wanted to do was they wanted to print the Bible. Okay, now what happened was I believe, and this is a kind of a vague idea of this, that the king or the leader of the country wanted to have control over who was allowed to copy a written document. And that's where the word copyright who had the right to copy. Okay, that's where initial copyright comes from. So nowadays we try and apply this ancient printing press terminology to modern software. Okay, so copyright. There's been considerable debate as to whether software should be copyrighted. Much of the debate focuses on the fact that software is generally licensed rather than sold to users. Copyright doesn't have to be registered or recorded. It comes into effect when a new piece of work is created. And the UK Copyright Service provides a registration for various creators. So there's the copyright parts of this act. The designs part. Designs are the appearance or construction of a device. An iPod, for example, has a distinctive design that has been widely imitated, but the complete design couldn't be copied because it's been protected by Apple. And then we have the patent or patent. This is the granting of exclusive rights on a particular design, and these must be registered. Now, what's the impact of this? Especially in the music industry, the recording industry of America, they seem to be very angry about this, okay, about people illegally downloading songs. Also, the film industry are annoyed about it as well. So, copyright infringement can lead to orders to pay damages, orders restraining the copy, orders to hand over profits, and orders to hand over all copies. So in serious cases of copyright infringement, courts have been known to grant copyright owners private search warrants to track down bootleg operations. So some illegal activities in this act are making unauthorized copies of software, making multiple copies of software when only one license has been purchased, supply, lend, or sell pirate software to third parties, using pirate software, transmitting copyright software. So, there's a little bit here about illegal file sharing. File sharing through torrents and things, BitTorrent, are very common these days. So we have here software piracy, music piracy, and film piracy. So those are all things that might be affected by this Copyright Designs and Patents Act. Okay, so the Intellectual Property Act 2014 was an update to copyright law in the UK, and it brings intellectual property law up to date and actually adds some better protections. So you can copyright the names of your products or brands, your inventions, the design or look at your products, things you write, make, or produce. Copyrights, patents, designs, and trademarks are all types of intellectual property protection. And you get some types of protection automatically. For others, you have to apply. So if you want to register a trademark, you would have to apply for that. And that's the Intellectual Property Act 2014, which updates the Copyrights Designs Act 1988. So what actually is intellectual property? Intellectual property is something you physically create. So an idea on its own, an idea for a book that you thought up, isn't intellectual property. But if you actually wrote a book, then that could be your intellectual property. Okay? Now, you could buy some intellectual property rights from an owner, or you can have a brand that could be a trademark. And it says here, intellectual property can have more than one owner, can belong to people or businesses, and can be sold or transferred. And if you're self-employed, you usually own your own intellectual property, even if someone else commissioned your work. And you usually will not own intellectual property for something you created as part of work while you were employed by someone else. So here's a little table. Automatic types of protection include copyright for writing and literary works, photography, films, TV, design right for object shapes, but you have to apply for trademarks and registered designs. Okay, so using more than one type of protection. So it is possible to register a name and a logo as a trademark, protect a product's unique shape as a registered design, create a patent for a new part, and use copyright to protect the drawings of a product. And there have been some changes to design law, because in the past, when designs were physical drawings, it was a little bit easier to protect them. Nowadays, there's been some updates to this, and some key changes are that it's a criminal offence to copy registered designs, and kind of updates have been made to like online access to documents relating to registered designs. Changes to the patent law include the Intellectual Property Act, which introduces a number of changes, marking patented products with a web address, the expansion of the Patent Opinion Service, and patent work sharing. So those are the kind of extra legislations that we have. So let's see, we have, see, Alex has put something into the chat here. Let's have a wee look at this link and see. I think this is about the prison population. Oh, that's just joining a Zoom meeting. Hang on, let me just click this. There we go. So here we go. This is, I've seen this graph before, or a similar one. So this is each country in the European community, I'm going to guess, if we're including the UK, and how many people they have in, how many prisoners per 100,000 inhabitants. So we can see down the kind of lower levels, Finland, Sweden down here, and then higher levels up here, Lithuania and Turkey. And I'm guessing here's Scotland a bit here. So if we were to draw a line roughly the same level as Scotland, seems like we've got kind of just a bit less people in prison than Poland and Hungary and Portugal, but a bit more than Spain. Yeah, I don't know if Turkey would technically count in there, because they're kind of skewing the statistics a little bit, aren't they? So now, you know, it does seem rather somewhat silly to put people in prison for sending hacking tools unless they're doing some serious damage. All right, so that was topic 5, legislation. There's some other things to think about as well. Apple actually create lots and lots of patents all the time, and they try and patent everything, and they have patent wars against Samsung and against other you know, big corporations. And the thing to think about is, you know, if you make a piece of software, you know, can you really keep charging people for it if you've already been paid? You know, so here's my take on it. You can use pirated versions of software, or you can use software that doesn't charge you and doesn't put what's called digital handcuffs on you. So for example, here, right, here is a program called, let's see, where is it? Let me make it a wee bit smaller here. Okay, here is a program called LibreOffice. And LibreOffice gives me Word documents, spreadsheets, presentations, drawings. You can even add on a LibreOffice based database. Now this doesn't come with any license. This is open source and free software. So we can use this and distribute this without having to worry about any of this legislation here. Now, until recently, LibreOffice, it's not quite as good as, for example, the most expensive Office suite. But let's open a new Writer document. There's a LibreOffice Writer document there. Okay, so I can type in here, hello everyone. All right, that's not, there's nothing wrong with this. This works just fine. And if we go help about LibreOffice, you should see that LibreOffice is a modern, easy to use, it's a modern, easy to use Office suite. Okay, I'm using LibreOffice version 6 here. All right, so my take on it is what we're best doing is not actually allowing these companies to have so much control over our lives. All right, we're better off using something that's already open source, that we're already allowed to distribute. So let me stop this share now, and I'll load up the questions for today. So stop the share. Let's have a look at Lab 6 then. Now, let's just do show. So a quick review of Lab 5, what we did in Lab 5. Right, in Lab 5, we scanned a target. Now, strange question I was being asked by someone, as I talked about at the beginning of the call there, is this will scan, because it's got a 0 in a /24, this will scan the whole subnet, and it should tell you where the target machine is. Okay. Then what we were going to do in Lab 5 is we got the results back of the port scan, and we could hopefully identify that one of the machines was Windows XP. Okay. Then what we would do is we would, hold on. Duncan raised hand. Duncan, yes, what's up? Did you mean to raise hand? Or did you just press the button, raise hand? Okay, we'll move on, right? Type your question into the chat if you. It just flashed up and said, Duncan raised hand. Okay, I need to fix this as well. This should be in the same font as that. That's annoying me. Hang on, I'll figure out what I said. Okay. Maybe something to do with the Mac. Dare I say it, the bad word. Okay, so then we're going to use an exploit in the MSF console, and this just involves searching and typing use and then saying the path of the exploit you want to use. Then we set some options, then we showed payloads, then we clicked exploit, and hopefully we got a Windows shell that looked like this. Hopefully, if we actually, yeah, hopefully we did. Okay, then we did, I taught you some 90s Windows commands like dir and a classic one, type, all right, which is similar to the cat command in Linux. Okay, so that was Lab 5. Now, I'll have a look over, everyone submitted it, so I'll have a look over that later on. Now, here we are going to look at Lab 6. So Lab 6, there's no new OVA file or anything. Lab 6 builds on Lab 5. Okay. Now, what we're going to do in Lab 6 is we're going to use a technique to crack Windows passwords. Okay, and we're going to use a thing called hashcat. Now, in order to understand this, there's a little bit of a background that Windows uses a thing called an LM hash. I think that's a LAN manager hash, although I'm probably wrong. So there was this simple algorithm where when you have a password, Windows would hide the password by converting it to lowercase, converting everything to uppercase, adding 14 characters, splitting it in two, creating two keys, and doing an encryption on the two separate keys. Now, that was really easy to reverse once it was figured out. Okay. Right, I'll respond to that question in the chat in a minute. So, we've got the Windows XP target OVA already from Lab 5, so we can get started with this straight away. So have a read through the introduction, and then we can get started. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to open a reverse TCP shell on the target with Meterpreter. Not sure exactly, it's Meterpreter or Meterpreter. So to do that, you just follow these commands, all right? Very similar to what we were doing in Lab 5. This is just a really cut down version of it. Now, next part. We then get access to the Windows machine, okay? And we should have a Windows shell. So if you type dir, you should see some Windows stuff, okay? Then we're going to run a command called hashdump. And what hashdump is going to do is hashdump is going to take the password file from Windows and dump it into a text file, and it's going to come out looking like something like this. So you'll have the username there, then a number, then the password hash, and that is an LM hash. Okay. Then what we're going to do is, let me just clear that away. We're going to use a thing called John the Ripper. Now, to check John the Ripper's installed, you just type John, and it should say something about John the Ripper, okay? So John the Ripper is a password cracking program that's built in to, that we can add to Kali, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this GitHub page. I'll open this now. And this GitHub page, okay, I'm not going to click download because it's going to download a giant text file that's 139 meg. And that's just plain text. Now, okay, it's not giant, but it's enough to ruin the audio on this video call for it to break up and my computer to stress out. So you can do that in your own time. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to save the rocku.txt file, which has lots of passwords in it. It's a password dictionary, into the same folder as the passwords XP text file that we generated when we ran hashdump. Okay. Then we're going to run John. We're going to say the format of the passwords is LM. Then we're going to specify some rules, and we're going to say the word list is the path to the rocku.txt file we downloaded. And we're also going to give it the path to the passwords.txt file. So these paths are very important, okay? You need to check that that's the right path to the password file and the right path, okay? It might look slightly different, okay, when you actually write it, okay? When you write it, it might be like slash, ooh, never done text before, slash home, slash Michael, slash documents, slash rocku.txt. Okay, you need to give it the exact path in there. Okay. Then you just run John show passwords, and John will show you the passwords from the hash dump. Okay, John will convert them. Then, once you know the password, you'll be able to log in to the XP machine. Now, I know some of you have already guessed one of the passwords, but I want you to try and use this to figure out the other passwords. And if you could show that you figured out the password using the password crack, that would be wonderful. Then in part 2, we're going to install something that George Mason is a very big fan of called Armitage. Okay, and Armitage, sorry, the Americans call it Armitage, all right? So Armitage is a graphical exploitation tool, okay? So to do that, we're going to run these commands, and then it'll open up a machine. We're going to click connect, and this will run Armitage, and then we can do a scan from Armitage, okay? You can think of this as just a kind of graphical version of Metasploit, a kind of front end for it. And that's lab 6. It's quite short. Found a couple of typos in there I'm not happy with. So let's just fix those, right? So look, I'll stop sharing my screen now. I'll see if there's any questions about lab 6. Yeah, and I'm having to re-download the Windows XP as I managed to change the password. Well done. Well, you've done the bonus bit. You need to find out what the other password is. I think it's for Bob or for Alice or something.